So welcome. Thank you very much for joining me today. Obviously with our recent purchase in our home down in Arizona, you guys have been just amazing at, managing it and really just like rolling with everything. So really appreciate you guys coming in and having this chat. So for those of you out there, this is Rick and Jen. They're the owners of Old Town Rental down in Scottsdale. And I wanted to sit down with them because again, we bought a house during kind of the pandemic, right, in July. And one of the major factors or reasons why we felt so comfortable purchasing down in Arizona of all places, which we really don't have a lot of tie to, was really because we knew Rick and Jen were on the ground and kind of were going to help us get through the, what do we do short-term rental wise and kind of really lend their expertise and help us kind of navigate that portion. And actually it's been a huge success for us so far. I mean, we've been just up and running, like 2 full months or something like that. Right. And you guys have just done a great job. And I think looking at your business and what you guys have built and how organized you are and like all the properties that you guys are representing and just how the properties actually look, whether that's social media or on all the other like listing sites, you guys just really nail it. And so I felt like it was a good opportunity to bring you guys on here to talk a little bit about short-term rentals in general, because we, in the real estate market, we get asked all the time, hey, I want to buy this property and I'm thinking about doing a short-term rental, or I'm thinking of, maybe living in it or renting out one of my rooms or something while I'm living in the property. And those questions come up and they can be very lucrative, for the property owners, whether or not it's just a straight up investment property. Maybe it's a secondary, property that the homeowner is visiting when they want to, and then they're renting it, when they're not there, or if they're living there and it's just extra income that's coming through the door. So I do know a lot of people now, especially in Seattle, are kind of looking at other markets to move their money around in, and selling up here and kind of looking, well, what's important to me? Where do I want to be in certain months of the year? Work from home has had a huge impact. I think also on the mindset of investment properties, because it's getting people to think, outside the box. Like I could live actually somewhere else for 3 months or 6 months of the year, or commute, here or there. And so it kind of just opened everyone's eyes up to, okay, well, what do I really want to do? And where do I want to spend my money? And those type of questions, life questions, right?
Right.
Again, I think that you guys have done a fabulous job. And so I wanted to bring your knowledge and expertise to people who are, kind of thinking about doing the same thing, whether they have properties up here in Seattle, or maybe they're zeroing in on the Arizona market, which we know is, super lucrative and has been very successful for a lot of people this year. So I felt a good time. Let's just kind of chat a little bit about you guys and your story first, and then we'll kind of dig into the specifics about, managing short-term rentals and what that means and all that good stuff.
We started back in December 2016. 16?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's when we got our first condo, and we actually gutted it and renovated it. And it was a very, very stressful time for both of us. So there's a lot of work that goes into remodeling a place. But we went through some contractors and it ended up just working out amazing for us. And then 6 months later, we ended up buying our second condo, and it kind of just grew from there.
Yeah, we bought the first one with the intention of trying the Airbnb market. We'd obviously stayed at Airbnbs when we travel overseas and domestically. So, we wanted to obviously check, knowing that Arizona was a good market for it, and, finding the kind of diamond in the rough as far as a condo that allowed it, and then we went into this one, needed some love before we could get it up and running. But, we were happy that we did. And that's kind of where it blossomed. Once we had the two, it turned into an actual business. I mean, we were running them as a business, obviously but we had a guest that stayed in one that was like, hey, I like what you guys got going on here. I want to buy one. And we set him up with our real estate buddy, and he put an offer in the next day. He said, I'm only going to do it if you guys will run it for us, because he was from San Francisco. And that's kind of where it just, grew from there. And, originally word of mouth, and obviously from there, it's just blown up.
So how many properties do you guys have in your portfolio now?
We've got 20 now. We're sitting in the 20th property right now as we get it ready to go live.
Gotcha. Cool. And so part of kind of that process, I guess, with getting up to speed, I mean, you guys both have other jobs, but you're kind of migrating now to this being kind of your full-time thing. Is that correct?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I started doing it full time at the end of last summer, and
Gotcha.
we're slowly finding that it's going to require both of us as we grow and as we scale. It's a full time job. There's no question, at least for one of us, if not both.
Yep. And are you're central to Scottsdale, Phoenix, or what other areas in Arizona do you guys manage?
Scottsdale, Phoenix, Tempe.
More or less the Phoenix metro right now.
Got it.
We get inquiries now and then from Sedona, Flagstaff. That might be a market that we, delve into farther down the road. But for right now, Phoenix metro, it's obviously where we live and where we play. So we have a pretty good grasp on, what's popular, where to be, all that sort of thing. So it makes it that much easier if we manage the property side by side with the ones that we own. So, and that being in our backyard makes it a heck of a lot easier.
Yep, for sure. Good. Well, why don't we kind of jump into, the mindset of, let's say someone comes and they're like, I want to buy an investment property, a short-term rental. What are the things that you guys recommend, I guess, for investors to look for in a property when they're out there searching? Like certain, attributes of the property itself that you think would be very successful?
I mean, just like with any real estate transaction, location is probably the number one key. Mm-hmm. Obviously, if you're looking at a single family home, if it's in an area that's sanctioned by an HOA or not, I mean, that's a big part of it. Looking at the neighborhood as a whole, obviously you can have the nicest house in the neighborhood, but if they're driving through, a rough part of the neighborhood to get to it, you can have the best property around, but if they're afraid to leave or come and go, then it's a little bit of an issue. So location plays a big part. Obviously when it comes to some of the peak season type activities, being in close proximity is most of that, but the Phoenix metro area is so large that there's, so many great neighborhoods and suburbs that, a lot of people don't think about. That's, just a stone's throw from 10 golf courses or, Scottsdale Stadium, as far as, being close to spring training ball fields, Talking Stick, some of the attractions that are here. And I mean, literally every time we turn around, they're adding some sort of new attraction, and they're spread out, all over the place. So it makes the Phoenix metro area easy, because from anywhere that you are, you can go 15 minutes in either direction and end up in one of the attraction places: Old Town, Fashion Square, Talking Stick, golf courses, spring training, Westworld,
Yep. And I think
location is probably the biggest.
And we're actually kind of seeing location. Obviously, that is number one in real estate, but we also actually are seeing a lot of these cabins up here in the Pacific Northwest that people like, remote areas that are going. That's definitely COVID sparred, but that's also been, as long, the house, and it has some sort of feature around it, right? So like it has a gorgeous view, or it's on a lake, or it's in like this, fantasy wooded, scenery. So we're seeing that as well. So I think that location, but also COVID has pushed people into kind of exploring other areas too.
That's definitely becoming more prevalent. I mean, not just COVID, inspired location, but I mean, just in general, we've gone from, I think when we started, they used to have some ranking metrics that you could look at online that, when we started, there was 2,800, comparable, short-term rental properties. Now there's 9,000. So finding something that's got some character, whether it's part of the neighborhood or, like you said, the view or something, finding those homes that have some character, or that you can create some character, in the home that's already there with a little bit of, a facelift or whatever is a big part of it. Because there's a lot more competition. There used to be more demand than there was properties, and that's clearly changed as people, realize that Arizona's, a pretty open market, as far as legislation and everything. And then, so it's, I mean, they've quadrupled the number of listings in the last 3 years. So it's, you got to step your game up as far as finding the house that's, a little bit more unique.
Yep. And so with that, I mean, you get those Pinterest worthy, pictures of, the hammock with the scenery and like all that sort of thing. Teeny hot tub, like those are features you could add to a property, right? Once you find the actual location is within proximity to maybe an airport, maybe it is a little bit more remote, but at the same time, you're adding those things. And I'm sure that you guys have tons of pointers and tips and things that people, You see probably golf greens. I know down in Arizona is a huge thing, right? The whole pool
Putting
out
green, yeah.
Oh yeah.
living scenario, you know, that's, you have to have those in order to be competitive down there for other features that, you know, comparative properties that are in the rental pool.
And with, obviously with the onset of COVID, you know, if the property, the more entertainment type amenities that the property has, the less you have to leave. And so that, you know, every box that you can check towards, you know, self-containment, you know, if somebody's, you know, in, you know, quarantine or working from home, why not do it where it's 70 and you can look outside at the pool or the putting green or whatever. The more boxes you can check as far as amenities in that particular home, the better, because you don't have to leave at any point. You know, everybody's entertained.
Right.
Yep, that's a totally good point. So with that then too, I guess, want to talk about upfront costs. So you've located a property, you know, obviously you kind of know what you're going to get, you know, per night, and maybe an estimated income schedule, right? And so then it goes into you purchasing the property and then you're actually furnishing it. And I think that that's one thing that, you know, it's one thing to buy the property, but the next kind of feed is, okay, well, how do you furnish it and with what? And you do have to dedicate a lot of time and energy and effort into that, because you're buying forks, knives and spoons, dishes, linens, like actual real
everything.
And then putting together kind of the style and the vibe that you want for that. And I mean, Jen, you've done a really good job, I think, with all of them, styling them. I follow you, you know, on social media where, you know, you're going in there and tweaking and doing those things. And I'm assuming that's something that we had furniture, so we just shipped it down, and obviously a very unique taste for our Airbnb, but our short-term rental. But that's something that you guys do too, right?
Right. Buys a property down here and they don't have time to furnish it and they want to have us manage it. We can also furnish it, design it however they want. And we try to make every property that we do unique so that we're not having the same theme in every single property.
Yeah. So I saw you guys had like a nautical theme one.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Nantucket.
Yeah.
And that was actually designed by the owner himself. So he did a really good job and we love it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. Because then you also stand out when you have like that character, that different theme that's running through your house. You just, people on the other side, you know, the potential guests are looking at it and they're like, oh, this is cool, because they connect with that type of theme, right?
Right. Yeah. We want to appeal to everybody and everybody's taste. So
yeah, that's good. So can you give like a ballpark if someone's buying, let's say a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house, what you think it would be to like furnish all the rooms, just furniture, right? That someone probably would have to put in, and then whatever that initial like push is with supplies and all that sort of thing.
For one of our clients out of the country, he actually purchased a property from our friend Johnny, you guys know, obviously, and he never even saw it. I mean, he started looking at, you know, condos outside of HOA, condos inside HOA, and slowly kind of stepped up, and then finally just pulled the trigger on a single family home with a pool in South Scottsdale that he never even saw. So Johnny got the keys and handed them over to us. So he still hasn't seen his property in person. And so we basically took that one, I mean, from square zero, you know, the walls and the floors. The property was renovated already, so the quality of the home was nice to begin with. But then you got, like you said, the knives and dishes and everything, and you know, generally stepped up in that situation, because I mean, it was literally everything. And I think that it probably came out to 12 or 13,000 when it was all said and done. And that's her being, you know, crafty as she is, finding the deals and, you know, some other stuff as far as, you know, some different resources for furniture and some other things. But, you know, safe to say a house, then it was a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house.
Exactly,
so,
yeah.
you know, safe to say if it's from square zero, you're probably 15,000 if it's bare.
15 to 20, that sounds about right for sure. Because you're doing TVs, I mean, it's the gamut.
And it also depends on how much time you have too, because if you have enough time to furnish it, then you can look for better deals. But when you're in a time crunch, finding deals is kind of hard, because especially when you're waiting for things to show up in the mail. So you're really going to like buy locally to furnish your place.
Yep, that's a good point too. And time is money as well. So even though you might want to save $100 on that nightstand, it's better for you to get it
costing yourself $250 a night.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so opportunity cost there for sure. All right, so is there anything you want to talk about, like people have to take in consideration, like when they're identifying their first home? I think we've pretty much covered
the other things that you don't think about in some cases, you know, like the curb appeal, the landscaping, things like that. I mean, one of the things that we've run into lately, when you're buying a house with a pool, the equipment is really a big issue. People have it inspected, but if it's, there's a lot of situations where, that can get costly, whether the pool, pools, you guys know just as well as anybody. I mean, I think that we're more versed in the logistics of operating pool equipment more than we really would like to be, but does the house have natural gas? If the house has natural gas, then heating a pool is a lot more efficient than in some cases, if that's something you want to offer as an amenity, and those types of things. Solar, things like that are obviously all perks if you're the owner when it comes to, overall costs to run. So those are a couple of minor things that people overlook so easily, as far as equipment. We've got a Seattle buyer actually that we helped him. He bought the house furnished, so he didn't have to do a whole lot, but it had an older air conditioning unit that, was working fine, but, didn't want to have to, have an issue where, some guests were displaced because it went out when it's 115 degrees, and went ahead and just did it up front, pool heat, stuff like that, getting all that out of the way right as part of your initial investment, so it doesn't sting as much later. But, those are things that are often overlooked. House looks cool, it's got some character, everything, but, if some of the equipment or some of the things that are powering your amenities, are suspect, then it could be an expensive fix down the road.
So basically, during the inspection period of buying, you just have to make sure that you know what you're getting, number one. And then number two, have money set aside for upgrading your systems to make sure that, you're pretty much operating as close to new, just so that you don't have any interruptions during your guest stays and stuff like that. So I think we've kind of touched on, I guess, the challenging aspects. If there's anything else you want to add, I guess, of owning a short-term rental, it's obviously time, it takes for coordination. And I know if you could kind of speak in between when you're the process of like booking and cleaners and all that sort of thing too.
Cleaning part is a challenge in itself, just finding the right people, and I think, we do know is, obviously we're involved in Facebook groups and other sorts of, groups that, people share information, and, there's people that advocate strongly for doing it all on your own, whether you're a remote owner or not, and having somebody on the ground obviously has a lot of value, but that's a big part of it. If you have a cleaning crew that, you trust for the most part, it's easy for a cleaning crew to come through and dazzle you at their first, couple of months, but then they start to get a little complacent. And if you're an absentee owner, you're really never going to know, until you start to get some negative reviews. And by that point, it's too late. So, that poses one of the bigger challenges, obviously, is keeping up to speed when it comes to, not just cleanliness, but now COVID level cleanliness, right. As far as disinfectant and everything else. And, that poses a challenge for remote owners, not, more than obviously local owners, but it's a challenge nonetheless. I mean, there's a lot that goes into it. You don't want, your guests showing up a little bit early and your cleaner's not wearing masks, or, you want to make sure that you're disinfecting high touch surfaces. And that's probably one of our biggest challenges, is just making sure that everybody is accountable, and that's, it's a little easier for us because, now that I'm doing it full time, I can peek in and do quality control and some things like that. But that comes from obviously all of our rentals being right in our backyard. But that, I think, is one of our biggest challenges, is keeping them from getting complacent and staying to that higher level.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that's hospitality in general, right? So you have to kind of keep everyone who's on your team motivated, because the end goal is to have happy guests, not just to clean the home. It's to actually have people walk into your property and feel comfortable, and it's clean, and ultimately get that good review that helps you in the end too.
Rely on our cleaners too to let us know when things are broken or when things are missing. Mm-hmm. So we have to take that into account as well too. So they're pretty much our all-seeing eye when we're not at the property.
Yep. And so then they just basically say, hey, this is broken, or we have like inventory of glasses that, 3 glasses are broken or something like that. And then you guys go ahead and replenish or address whatever needs to happen at that point.
Exactly.
And that's something that's easily overlooked in most cases. You don't, if you take a basic inventory when the property's set up, but something could go missing if you don't have people that are on top of it. Something could go missing 3 or 4 stays down the road, and then you don't have any recourse when it comes to any sort of host protection from the booking portals or any sort of compensation. So, time is of the essence with things like that. And if you don't have, the people that are in the homes with an eye for the details, then, you can miss out on an opportunity to make sure that you're compensated fairly for, something that may happen or something that's missing or broken or any of those sorts of things. And I mean, when it comes to something as simple as a TV remote, if they don't notice that the TV remote's there, and then the next guests come and they're tearing the house apart, next thing you know, they're pulling up the couch cushions to try and find the TV remote. Maybe there's a Cheerio, and now all of a sudden their stay is,
completely
spiraling in the wrong direction, even though it's something so simple. It's just, those are things that a lot of investor owner operators, silly things like that, you just don't even think about. You just don't even think about. And that's one of the things that clearly part of the reason we're here is because, somebody going in and investing in a property and they want to do a short-term rental. 4 years ago, you could have, gone to IKEA and decked the place out and made the beds and put a smart lock on and away you go. But that's not the way it is now. You got to set yourself apart. And, a lot of that comes with the logistical care of, the day-to-day affairs of having it, running it like a business. It's a lot changed.
Yep. And, a lot of people now are going from staying it has to be a hotel. It's like anyone, and a homeowner, anyone who is owning a property for short-term rental should think, okay, well, if I was walking into my property and like I was staying in a hotel, right? What would I expect in terms of service, quality,
right,
amenities, all those things? So really they should be looking at it from that perspective, and people who, contractors or, cleaners who are also helping, should also be looking at it from the other side in terms of servicing the property in that way too. So it sounds like you guys have it all completely dialed with.
Somebody had a question. I don't know if we're Leanne. If your business a mix of owning properties for Airbnb as well as managing short-term rentals of other homeowners' properties? I think we might have covered that, but yes, we invest in our own properties. We manage them side by side with our own properties. So our portfolio includes other people's properties that we manage as well as our own.
Yep.
And it looks like Steven, what is the best way to market your short-term rental? Obviously the tools that are in front of you as far as Airbnb, VRBO, there's 40 plus booking platforms that you can market your short-term listings on. We use a channel manager that kind of helps us broadcast across the bigger spectrum, but obviously you start there because those are the more well-known. Airbnb is kind of the, when everybody says I own an Airbnb as opposed to a short-term rental, it's become a household name at this point, but those are the resources that are right in front of you. And then clearly social media, your own website, other forms of marketing are always helpful too.
So I guess moving into the process, let's say, okay, you've furnished the place. Now you guys are kind of taking over. I know that you've said in the past, the first 90 days is like the most critical, part. Why don't we talk about that a little bit when you're first releasing your property, to the market?
So once you're at the point where you're ready to go live, we call it, obviously you've set the property up, you've staged it, you're ready to go. You've checked all the boxes as far as everything that the house needs, obviously, to welcome guests. When I say the first 90 days is critical, is because you don't get a second chance to make a first impression. In the beginning, your visibility is low. If you're not an established host, you're fighting, you're a small fish in a big pond. You're literally trying to fight for visibility, and that's 100% key. If you're not showing up on the first, second, or even 10th page on Airbnb, you're likely not getting seen at all. And so a lot of the things that you do in the beginning, obviously listing with a management company such as ourselves, we're Superhost 10 times over, premier partners with VRBO. A lot of that plays into the algorithms as far as your placement. Going in it with one property on your own fresh is, you're fighting, and at that point it typically requires, you got to be the cheapest one, or you got to really stand out as far as some special feature or something like that. And let's be honest, most of the properties don't have that ability. But if you only have 5 reviews and one of them is bad, now all of a sudden you're a 4.0, and it just triggers all of the algorithms on any of the marketing platforms in the wrong direction. Right. So that's why the first 90 days is key, because that's typically where you're starting to build up your reviews, and you have a limited number of them. So that's when one can really throw you off. Once you get, some of our properties, I think, are over 100, then a bad review is not going to take you out of the visibility range. But in the first 90 days, if you're lucky, you're going to get 10 or 12, reviews. And at that point, if one of those goes sour because you overlooked something, or, missed something or made somebody unhappy or whatever, then that's when it's absolutely crucial.
Yep. And so I know we have talked before too about once you get that property kind of on autopilot, why don't we speak to kind of like the time frame, say it's up and running, you have good reviews, you're maintaining it and keeping, the momentum on the property and bookings going. But I think we had a conversation offline about just kind of at that point where it gets to that sweet spot where it becomes just kind of turnkey and just a pure investment.
I mean, I think once you've cycled through all 4 seasons, or peak, mid-peak, Arizona, obviously it's sunny every day. I mean, for the most part, just the range in temperature is really the seasons. But, you've got, once you've gone through, whenever you start, a calendar year from that point, that way you've started to build up some reputation. You start to get a little visibility. You've gotten some people through your home, however you had to go about doing that. And, now you're rated higher. You've got people that are leaving comments saying this is the best Airbnb I've ever stayed at. That's when the longevity factor kicks in, and then you kind of really, I mean, the full on cruise control autopilot is probably at the start of that second year. Mm-hmm. Because then you start to get some repeat clientele and it's easy. You've already got an entire year under your belt. You kind of know the peaks and valleys. You got a clear understanding of the events and all of the other things going on. And that's when it really becomes, kind of a set it and forget it type deal if you've got the right, policies in place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's something to remember too. There's a lot of upfront costs, but at the same time, you kind of have to see what the ebbs and flows are of your market too. So wherever you're looking at purchasing, what are the peak season? What's the low season? What does that actually mean to the rates and are people renting when it's 120 degrees out, is it, or, when they can't actually go and it's, the property's buried in 4 feet of snow, right? You kind of have to kind of look at all those different factors before purchasing, or say, hey, this is the right property for me. I'm okay if it's, not usable 4 months out of the year because the other months make up for that cost of the property, right?
And you got to come up with a strategy. There's another question from Steven says, when starting out, is it best to set pricing below market to get traffic and reviews? There's kind of two answers to that same question. It really is going to depend on your finances. I mean, if you have the ability to, maybe just, it really depends on your strategy. If you're looking just to break even, or if you're looking to excel, or you're looking to, start stacking reviews or traffic, you can definitely price yourself below the market and you can fill your place, but you start to open yourself up to the wrong types of clientele and some other things. It really comes down to, that's probably something that's more of a strategy for somebody managing their own property on their own and just launching into it, because that's really, the challenge is the visibility again, and being the lowest to market in your comp set is going to get you at the top of the visibility. So right. That's a strategy. There's different strategies for different, programs. If you're a single owner launching your first Airbnb, then that strategy is probably a little bit more effective. You just have to stay on top of the guests a little bit more, because if you're in that lower price point, you don't know what you're going to get. You can minimize the minimum stays and all of that stuff to fill your property and chase those, first 15 or 20 reviews, and then kind of work your way up. And that's really what we had to do in the beginning. I mean, we were, in our condos, when we were brand new, there was 25 of them in the same complex, but, we had to come in a little bit lower than everybody else to get rolling. But, the strategy is different if you step up and, you use management right out of the gate, because then your visibility is way higher just based on the reputation of the management profile.
Just kind of going down our list of questions that we had, our outline here. So any myths about owning short-term rentals that you could think of? I
mean, the myth that you can just throw it together and put it online and it's going to fill up is, again, 4 years ago, that would have happened because you've got more travelers than you did Airbnbs, and even 6 years ago, even 2 years ago, but you got to get more skin to the game at this point to be competitive. The myth is you can come down here, you can buy a property, it's Arizona, throw some furniture in it, slap a smart lock on the door, and away we go. Well, it's certainly not that easy. So that's probably, and I guess another myth at this point is that, everyone out there, as far as, communities and HOAs and governing parties and everything are going to flat out shut them down. So that's another myth. And that's something that I think, a lot of people have in the back of their mind, when they're starting this process, is the myth that, these municipalities are going to flat out shut down short-term rentals.
Yep. And we could kind of talk a little bit about that too, because I know in Arizona, there really hasn't been talk of that. The HOAs are a huge thing, right? For different, and I know for us purchasing down there, we think of HOAs as in like gated communities, which I know you guys have down there, but more so like the condominium buildings, which are very, very stringent, not allowing the Airbnbs. But actually where we ended up purchasing, there is an HOA. And so, but it's not a gated community. It's like any regular street.
Right.
Right? You have to be careful and actually
Yours is a unique scenario in itself. So that's not the norm.
Yeah. There's like little subdivisions though that have
right.
these ways that they don't look like a cohesive community whatsoever. So you do have to be a little bit careful when you're down there to make sure you know what you're kind of getting yourself into, for sure.
And there's some investors that just don't care, or it really depends on the property. Your example, the property that you guys bought is a compound for the most part. No one really know if people are coming and going because it's gated and everything else. So clearly, if you're looking at it as purely an investment platform, you definitely want to stay away from an HOA. There's no one's setting aside budget for legal battle, when it comes down to it, to protect your HOA. But, in some cases, if the HOA did put their foot down, you got to look at the investment from a standpoint of, okay, if I did go long-term instead, is it still going to cover the costs, or is it still going to make me a little bit of money, or whatever? But general rule of thumb is, if you're flat out looking to invest in a short-term rental, is to avoid the HOA altogether.
The other scenario, I guess, if someone's looking at using it like part-time, right? So that's another kind of buyer base that, maybe they can, and that would be maybe in our scenario too, where, we have an HOA, but we're looking at using it for a good portion of the time too. So that would be another scenario where it could work.
And there's legal loopholes, but nobody wants to tread down that path. I mean, there's ways around it, but it's not worth it if you can identify a property that doesn't, and it's at the same level or better or worse or whatever, or close to the same level as one inside of an HOA, you definitely steer towards one that's not.
All right. So with any success stories that you guys kind of want to talk about? I know we talked about kind of the myths and the more of like the heavier stuff when it comes to, getting set up. But I know that you guys, with the 20 properties that you guys do have, what are you seeing in terms of numbers, people making per month? Anything specific there?
I mean, we've
had the last couple of months have been a record for us. So we're actually doing pretty well.
COVID, I mean, I guess this kind of goes back to another myth. I mean, COVID, everyone thinks that COVID killed the short-term rental market, but to be honest with you, I mean, maybe again, those, you own one property and, it's your lifeblood kind of deal, and you got a handful of cancellations or whatnot, and it, ruined your day. But for the most part, COVID kind of hit us for 6 weeks, and then it's really actually spiked our business because of how, in depth some of the lockdowns are in other parts of the country. People are traveling a lot more domestically just to escape that, leaving Seattle when it's pouring down rain and you can't go to any restaurants, and coming to Arizona for 10 days or 20 or 30 days, and doing it in the peak season when it comes to a revenue perspective, starting really November 1 and ending, the end of April is kind of our peak season, and so we get, higher rents and whatever, but now we're not only getting higher rents, but, you're getting a lot more quality, longer term stays. I think that I pulled up some numbers, and, prior to COVID, the year prior to COVID, going into the spring peak season, the lead time, meaning how far in advance somebody was booking, was like 119 days. Now the only difference, and then the average stay was like 4.7 days. Now with COVID, the way that everything is, now the lead time's a lot less. People are booking a little bit less because of the uncertainty, but now the lead time I think might be 30 days, 35 days. but the average stay is like 8.5 days, so the length of stay is almost doubled.
Yep.
Granted, the lead time is a lot less, but so you're not getting that, warm and fuzzy feeling that your entire spring is already booked, but it's, it's working out relatively well, and we're rolling into the peak season and it's full steam ahead.
Yeah. And that is interesting because, again, that's COVID, people making those short-term decisions of, hey, let's just get out of here now. What's available? I mean, actually, people up here are doing that for the holidays, right? Right now, everything's booked in, let's say, the surrounding area of like an hour and a half, right? And so that's definitely something that's out there. And then the extended stays are, well, people could work from home or work from wherever they are. So why don't they just basically, park themselves for a week? And actually kids are, even if they have they're doing remote learning. So it's like,
right.
You just take your kids from their home school and take them to vacation school. And
right. I think the aftermath of the uncertainty of COVID only plays into the short-term rental, program. I mean, it's just like you said, every part of that is true. And we're experiencing all of that. I mean, it's, Chicago, Minnesota, Seattle, Portland, California, where they can't even go, in some cases to the grocery store after 10 p.m. Right. It's crazy. And Arizona, I mean, we did have some shutdowns, for a small period of time, but, for the most part, the government at this point has said, okay, instead of shutting down the economy, let's figure out ways to work around, the restrictions. So, Ducey pledged, however many millions of dollars to helping restaurants extend their patios and, even onto the sidewalks in some cases, right. So that they can,
lots of outdoor seating.
Yeah. So you can sit outside and enjoy a meal instead of being closed. So, I mean, we go a different spot for lunch almost every day. I mean, there's no real restrictions. I mean, outside of having to wear a mask and, you might have to wait in line a little bit before you can go into one of the stores at Fashion Square. But outside of that, it's, everything's pretty much, status quo, and everything's pretty much operating normally.
Yep. But evolving to what the kind of the modern day standards are with, making sure everyone's wearing masks, everything's sanitized. That sort of thing too. I mean, even just us going down there, yeah, you can go out to a restaurant if you want, or you don't. And the good thing again about Airbnb is that you could stay for 7 to 10 days and you could go to Costco and fill up your fridge and you could stay right there and not have to leave actually the property at all. You're just in a completely different environment and scenery. And then that goes back to your actual house, having all the amenities and stuff one would need not to have to leave the property. So right. If it's like a desk that's set up as a work from home, or and you have like a children's room that has little children's desks in them, or whatever it is, right? It's all those little that you can make to make your property more, stand out among the rest, more functional, and just, a better experience than what we've experienced before on the short-term rental platform. And then even in hotels, right? Because then that goes to, well, what is the hotel industry going to do? Because it feels like everyone is, no one wants to be stuck in a hotel room because they're not going to be in their room the whole time. The whole point of a hotel is to be, out, kind of more social environment. You're not hunkering down in your, 300-foot room.
I think people are, the hotel aspect of it, and just in basic, just research, watching people's behavior. I think the lobbies and the elevators and the people that actually do have a genuine concern for, their social distancing and all of that stuff. I mean, who wants to go to a hotel where you have to wait, in line 6 feet apart to even check in, and then you got to wait because the elevator only takes 2 or 4 people at a time, and you have to stand in each corner of it. And then you want to go out, go downstairs to have dinner, but you can't get a reservation because they're operating at 25% capacity. It's just, it takes away from the whole reason that you do that. Not only that, but right now, for investors that are in whatever state domestically, in the United States, domestic travel probably for the next at least year or two is going to take precedence over international travel. And, I read an article the other day that some ridiculous percentage of travelers are traveling within 300 miles of home. Little staycations. I mean, we're looking at doing one ourselves, going up, to Flagstaff to see some snow for a week. It's just, there's a lot more emphasis on, staying local, and then keeping your entire family in a space that no one else is coming into. You don't want maids coming into your room every day to turn it over, but then you want it to stay clean or whatever the case. So, people are trending towards, whole home stays, like what a short-term rental. Stephen actually put a question on here, said, what is average occupancy on a yearly basis? And this probably varies from location, but what is the general expectation in a perfect world? I mean, in a perfect world, it's 90% occupancy, 12 months out of 12 months. But I mean, if you take the peaks and valleys, I mean, I think that we started out in our first year and we added our second property after 6 months. I think we were about 58% for the year, but those same two properties at the end of year 2 were closer to 85%. Obviously it has a lot to do with the property itself, but this year it would be next to impossible to even gauge. But I think that, we're going to probably end up somewhere around, over a portfolio of, I think 9 that would have been functioning for the entire year, somewhere around 70%.
That's still really good given everything that, has happened during the year. So moving, I guess, post-COVID, right? So we have the vaccine that's kind of coming in now and into play, and we're kind of forward thinking for 2021. Do you have, I know we've learned a lot during this year. Obviously your business model is probably pivoted towards more of the cleaning and like just the different processes that you guys do for interaction of guests and stuff like that. Are there anything that you're going to take from, I guess, the systems and the process this year and just kind of continue on, like it ended up being something that, was great for you? I know for me, there's tons of things that happened that we evolved our business. Is there anything specific that you've kind of had to adapt? And then,
I mean, it's definitely not going to hurt to take the extra precautions when it comes to disinfecting. I mean, I think COVID as a whole has raised a more public awareness just to basic hygiene, unfortunately that wasn't focused on prior to that. But, I think that we'll probably just continue to implement, the cleaning regimen, forever. I mean, it's just a more sterile environment, from a cleaning perspective, not a style perspective, but a more sterile environment overall is just a better way to live, in general, whether you're on vacation or in your own home. So I think that that's probably something that will definitely carry over. Yep. I don't know how long we can expect, our cleaners to wear masks while they're cleaning and stuff, but I think that that's something that we will carry over for, as long as, it makes sense. And, the extra cleaning protocol, because it's just, I made a mention to the manager of our cleaners and Jen yesterday. We walked in on the cleaners being extremely thorough, without us, on top of them doing it. We walked in on them dropping off supplies, and I was extremely pleased with the extra precaution that they were taking. And I think that, we'll let that ride and keep that implemented for, the foreseeable future for sure.
Yeah, for sure. I do think going forward for 2021, though, and actually future years, right? I think that, the people are going to gravitate, like you said, to the domestic stays. I do think that the short-term rental aspect of things, people want to go from a home to a home. They want to have those amenities. They want to have that kind of all-inclusive service, all-inclusive, property. And so maybe that's something that we potentially will see more happen more in 2021 with all these different properties and the service offerings too, maybe even within the properties and the hosts that people are coming in, maybe a refrigerator is full, that there's a shopping list that's already been, checked off the list, everything's in the refrigerator, and the people just kind of come right in and they have everything there. So they don't even have to, leave the property.
Those are definitely services that we're integrating into our day-to-day affairs on, on specific properties that, are higher end properties. I mean, we offer a handful of concierge type services, just like you could expect from calling the concierge desk at the hotel, if you need some help with a dinner reservation or something like that prior to your arrival, if you don't have time to handle it, there's certain things that we can do just through relationships that we've built, with other people. We've got guests staying at one of our places right now that we've got a private chef going out there today, to do a surprise dinner for their folks. There's a lot of that. And we've always offered, to go out and fill a grocery list, ahead of time for a small fee and, make it a more comfortable arrival for a lot of people. So, our services are evolving too for, from the demand based on COVID and, not wanting to go out into the public in some cases. And so, our programs have evolved from that too.
Yeah, that's awesome. That is awesome. You guys are the best. Really up in the game in terms of, what people have to do to compete, which is great.
And there's plenty of competition.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's more. I mean, people, as you know, more properties get thrown kind of into, you know, the rental pool. It's definitely important to kind of set yourself apart. And we've already talked about that, but you guys are doing a great job. Is there anything trend-wise that you're seeing kind of with your clients that they're purchasing, using it as a secondary home? Or are you seeing like people just purely as an investment? Are you seeing people actually moving maybe from their home situations and renting rooms?
I mean, we're all over the spectrum. I mean, it's right now, it's, you know, in the beginning we were out searching for clients and now they're searching for us. But I think that, I mean, our most recent properties, like I said, an investor bought it from Barbados, had never even seen it. You know, that's a situation. Obviously that's an isolated situation, but you know, we've got a woman that had, you know, bought her house, lived in it forever, and now moved in with her significant other, and it's sitting there and decided that she wants to put it on the market, you know. Or we've got one that's, you know, an interesting situation. He lives in it and he rents it as often as he can and goes and stays in his apartment, you know, when he's not using it. When he gets to use his house and lay by the pool, he's happy, but when has to stay at his apartment and make money, he's happy too. So, you know, it's a strange, you know, kind of bundle of situations lately. You know, like the one that we're sitting in right now, the guy built it from the ground up, you know, custom architecture, you know, tried to go different ways, some long-term, lease the whole building, and it's come full circle back to, you know, we're going to go ahead and do a short-term rental. You know, and I think that one of the things, you know, before we go, that a lot of people, you know, we always get, why wouldn't I just do it long-term? More security and long-term, you know, it's, you know, one of the things that people don't recognize when it comes to a long-term tenant, and, you know, we've been tenants, we rent, you know, just to keep our, you know, our options open as far as investing. But what people don't understand is when you have a long-term renter, you know, if they break something or they put a hole in a wall or they, you know, drop wine on the carpet or whatever, they don't have to address that issue right away. You know, they might say, okay, well, I got to make sure I, you know, clean that before I leave, or I got to fix that before I, you know, before my lease is up, or any of those types of things. And without proper notice and a real hands-on landlord, you don't get to see your property. You know, it might be a year, it might be 6 months, however long your lease is. And I think that people kind of sweep issues under the carpet, and then all of a sudden it's time to, you know, we got to move out. Oh, we got to go fix all of these things, and you know, and then either say, you know, to hell with it, keep my deposit, and then you get stuck with this. But with a short-term rental, you know, not only are you making 30 to 50% more money on your investment, you know, clearly because in nightly rates as opposed to monthly rates, there's a huge, you know, difference there. But you've got, you know, a couple sets of eyes every single time your place gets clean. I mean, who doesn't want their house cleaned 8 times a month? You know, whether, you know, your house is being cleaned 8 times a month, and there's a set of eyes in your place, you know, every single time it's cleaned, plus the time your manager, you know, does a walkthrough, you know, so any little issues are addressed right away. I mean, there's really less risk for the most part in a short-term rental, you know, outside of the people that are leery of, I don't want somebody throwing a rager in my house and trashing everything, but clearly there's precautions that come into play that prevent that as well. So there's really, it's a fail safe, you know, and if you have to go long-term to cover your mortgage, it's always in your back pocket. You know, it's just, there's no reason, you know, if you have the ability to do it, there's no reason not to at least give it a shot, you know, because you'll find that it's way more lucrative, you know, in the long run. You know, if you keep a short-term rental operating, you know, 4 or 5 years, and you really get the you know, the repeat clientele and all that stuff, and get it to the point where it's just functioning at 85% occupancy, you know, month in and month out, the properties pay for themselves and then some. Your next property, your next investment. But that's one of the biggest things, is when people are like, oh, why don't I long-term rent it instead? There's more security in that. And it's just entirely false.
Totally. No, I see that. That's very, very, very good point that I never really kind of thought about. One thing you did say, though, that I think we should touch on before we finish up here, is the quality of people, I guess, the screening aspect of when you're booking. And this is something I kind of learned through you guys, how you guys are actually able to kind of screen based on people who have reviews and all that sort of thing. So why don't you talk, I guess, a little bit about that? Because I think that is like a nightmare scenario where someone throws a rager and let's say the TVs are broken or things get stolen or, you know, all that, then that very, very extreme scenario. But how can people best go about preventing that from happening?
We don't allow instant booking, which that means we can't really screen our clientele if you have that. So there's usually like a pre-approval process. So we'll, you know, look at their profile, look at their reviews,
Look where they're from.
Where they're from. Are they local? We've noticed that people who are local are not trying to, but they're more prone to like having parties at the place, which that's happened to us. So we have to be weary about that. And then we also, at a lot of our properties, we offer noise aware, which helps us keep track of the noise levels in the house. Mm-hmm. So that helps as well too.
Good.
Yeah, the booking platforms won't allow you to discriminate. You know, there's strategic ways, and it's definitely not any form of discrimination. I mean, we've had local guests that have been, you know, an absolute pleasure to host, but mm-hmm. you know, unfortunately, the majority of them, you know, the situation isn't, you know, pleasant in most cases. But you know, we've had kind of these trends, you know, where at one point, you know, it was almost all locals. And not, when I say local, it's not somebody coming down from Sedona or coming up from Yuma. It's somebody from Phoenix wanting to stay in Scottsdale, you know, and that's always a little suspect to begin with, you know, but you can set it up, you know, like she was saying, without having instant booking. You know, you can have instant, but we like to just kind of have that opening message because, you know, to formulate an inquiry, they have to type a message. Mm-hmm. You know, at that point you can kind of, you know, thumb through it without, you know, discriminating. You can ask some strategic questions that'll, you know, kind of weed out the riffraff for the most part. And I mean, we've hosted coming up on almost 2,000 stays in 4 years. And, you know, we've only had 1 or 2 issues. And I mean, the significant issue that was arising was in a property over Labor Day weekend. And we flat out, you know, she wanted to have a birthday party, and, you know, we did all of our screening, and we allowed her to rent. And then, you know, the noise alert started happening, and, you know, I went over to check on the property, and she's got a DJ in the kitchen. You know, the first noise alert happened, and we, you know, gave her a warning. The second one happened. I went over there, and I mean, I think by 9:30 we were, you know, realized what was going on, and the entire house was empty by 10:30, you know, with the cooperation and everything. So we nipped that in the bud before it, you know, it got out of hand. But, you know, those nightmare scenarios are extremely rare to begin with. Unfortunately, you only hear about those, you know, when it comes to media, especially here in Arizona. I mean, if there's a party, it's always at an Airbnb. If somebody's getting beat up or shot at a party, you never see that happening at, you know, a house in Mesa that the parents are out of town. It's always an Airbnb, you know, whether it is or it isn't. But, you know, there's a lot of fail safes that prevent that from happening. I mean, we've had, you know, like I said, coming up on 2,000 guests, and, you know, I've had 2 very, you know, rare scenarios, and it's, you know, we do a lot. I mean, there's always new gimmicks and tricks to, you know, figuring that part of it out. But you can set yourself up to where, you know, you've got a minimum age, they've got to be recommended by another host, they got to have all forms of verification. You know, there's a lot of fail safes that are built into the booking platforms, but then there's also some fail safes that comes from strategic messaging, you know, back and forth before you know, agree to take a booking in the first place. Because we don't necessarily, you know, just not take a booking from somebody with 0 reviews, you know, but we'll dig a little deeper. You know, maybe they've been on the platform for a couple of years, you know, as a host, or maybe they've, you know, they haven't used it, and, you know, this is their first time to really delve into it. There's some quality, you know, guests in there still.
So we're kind of rounding out our hour here, and thank you for answering all those questions. I know that's super helpful, and I love talking to you guys. So anything else you want to touch on about your like services that you offer, just so people kind of know what you guys do? I know we touched on a lot of it, but
we're at a point right now where, you know, I mean, we just kind of decided collectively that, you know, we do have the ability to take on a few more clients. I mean, we're selective at a certain extent, but, you know, we do have the ability for the first quarter of next year to start working with some more clients. You know, like I said, I've transitioned into doing it full time, and Jen's probably not that far behind. So, we do have some opportunity if there is some people that are interested, to take the next step, just like your friend, that we're working with right now, Kellen. So we do have some opportunity out there for sure. And we are evolving our things. We've got some exciting things that we're going to start implementing into, our processes and the guest experience that, we don't necessarily want to share, but they're coming. But there's, it's not as scary as it seems. I mean, if anybody's watching that's interested in investing, it's, getting over that initial fear of just the dollars is really the hardest part. Stephen asked, doesn't Airbnb vet folks? I mean, to a certain extent, they screen and they eliminate the bad apples, but there's really no way to fully screen out their clientele. I mean, you can kill one profile and open up another one in 30 seconds. So it's not, they don't do it as much as you would like them to do, but they're getting better.
Again, thank you, Jen and Rick, so much from Old Town Rental, coming on here, chatting more. I'll post your contact information for everyone so they can reach out. And then if there's any questions of me, just feel free to reach out to me as well. And
thank you for having us.
Yeah. And I hope you guys have wonderful holidays. We'll see you just after the new year, maybe.
Yeah, sounds like it.
We're really looking forward to it.
All right. Have a good one. Thank you.
Happy holidays. Bye-bye.
Bye.